Cinema, the magic vehicle, a comprehensive guide. Journey 1, 1913 to 1950.
Today our mission, it's guided by some really fascinating bits from Cinema, the Magic Vehicle, that huge film history book. We're basically hunting for an early cinematic gem.
And that gem is Polikushka. It came out in 1922, directed by Aleksandr Sanin. It's a silent film, yeah, and often gets kind of lost in the shadow of later giants like Eisenstein.
Right.
But our sources really frame it as a true masterwork from that early Soviet period. And it's based on this, pretty intense short story by Leo Tolstoy.
Okay, so here's our promise to you listening. This deep dive, it's a shortcut. By the end, you'll really grasp that huge shift in Russian cinema, from just novelty flicks to actual serious art. And maybe more importantly, you'll know exactly why Polikushka is seen as the most outstanding film of its time, especially considering, the odds against it.
Yeah, and to really get why it was such a breakthrough, we kind of have to start right at the beginning. Film's arrival in Russia.
Okay.
The very first show was, get this, May 1896. And the Tsar himself was there.
Wow. Okay. So high society noticed right away.
Absolutely. But then for the next 20 years or so, the focus was purely, basic. Russian films weren't that different from films elsewhere. Mostly curiosity, crude entertainment.
Crude how? Technically?
Yeah, technically and narratively.
Yeah.
Very theatrically staged.
Right.
Actors sort of walking in front of a camera that doesn't move much. Big, broad gestures. No real sense of cinematic language yet.
So if we're putting it in context with, say, American film, this is before The Birth of a Nation, before D.W. Griffith really started defining how movies worked.
Exactly that. They're historically interesting, sure, but artistically, they're stepping stones.
Yeah.
You had directors like Yakov, Protazanov, Vladimir Gartin doing important work for the time. But they hadn't really broken free from just filming stage plays, essentially.
Okay, so when does the real change happen? When does the art begin?
Well, the sources are pretty clear on this. The real beginning of artistic activity, as they put it, happens right after the revolution. That event just shattered everything, all the old ways, and it created this real hunger for new kinds of expression. And Polikushka, it lands right in that moment. It sort of bridges the gap.
How so?
It connects that Tsarist tradition of adapting prestigious literature with this new, intense Soviet artistic energy.
And the film's reputation, according to our sources, it's huge. It keeps being called the most outstanding work of the pre-Eisenstein era of Soviet cinema.
Yeah, it's quite a claim. And what's really interesting is that it wasn't like a complete break from everything before it. Polikushka is described as the apogee, the absolute peak of the most respected type of filmmaking from Tsarist Russia.
Which was?
Adapting the great Russian writers. That was the high-status stuff, often pushed by producers like Alexander Sanin. He was, believe it or not, a retired Cossack officer who got into funding literary films.
A retired Cossack officer making Tolstoy adaptations. That's quite the image. A mix of authority and high culture.
It definitely shows how seriously they took these literary projects.
Yeah.
But, and this is key, the way Polikushka actually got made was very much post-revolutionary.
Okay.
It was produced on this unique profit-sharing basis by an outfit the sources basically call a film commune.
A film commune. What was the actual name? Sounds like alphabet soup.
It does. It was Mezropom Rus Torgovi Domrus.
Okay, say that again slowly.
Mezropom Rus Torgovi Domrus. Basically, think of it as a partnership. Mezropom was an international workers' aid group, and Torgovi Domrus was more of a commercial trading house.
So international socialist solidarity meets practical business.
Pretty much. That blend is what actually allowed the film to happen at all in those chaotic times.
That context, the mix of old literary goals and this new communal way of making it really sets the stage for the story itself. Let's get into the plot, because the Tolstoy story they picked is incredibly dark, relentless, really.
It is. It centers on Polike, known everywhere as Polikushka. He's a serf, and he's also known as the worst drunk on the estate. But he desperately wants to change, to reform.
And he gets a chance, a test. The lady of the manor decides to trust him again. She sends him on a really important errand. Go fetch a large sum of money. It's meant to show her faith in him.
Yeah, a huge test of character. But this being Tolstoy, it's doomed from the start, isn't it?
Seems that way. What happens?
On his way back, Polikushka falls asleep in his cart, just nods off. And in that moment, the money, this huge sum, it just slips out of his hat. Gone. Lost.
Oh, no.
And the consequences just spiral downwards. It's brutal. He's overcome with despair, total hopelessness, and he hangs himself.
God, that's grim.
And it gets worse for the family. His unsupervised baby son accidentally drowns. Just devastating loss piled on loss.
It's almost overwhelmingly tragic.
It is. And then this story takes another turn, moving beyond just personal tragedy into something more mythical, almost, which the film captures brilliantly. Wow. Well, the sources point out that the lost money is eventually found by another peasant, but he's deeply superstitious. He knows, or believes, the money is tainted by Polikushka's fate. He won't touch it.
So the money itself becomes cursed, those fatal rubles.
Exactly. It becomes this symbol of bad luck, of destruction. The peasant who finds it feels haunted by Polikushka's ghost. He can't rest until he passes the money on to his nephew.
Just pushing the curse along.
Right. It taps right into what the sources call the Eastern European myth of money as a destructive and sinister force. The idea that wealth corrupts, it ruins, it brings terrible fate.
Okay, so given that really heavy, almost melodramatic plot, how did the film manage to be more than just, a film tragedy? How did it become this landmark?
Yeah, that's the core question, isn't it? And this is where we get to the real breakthrough, the aha moment. The film pulls off two incredible things. First, it provides this amazing, fine naturalist record of rural life in the era of serfdom.
So it felt real, authentic visually.
Exactly. It captured the look and feel of that world. But the real artistic leap, with the thing hailed as, like, a world first, that's down to the lead performance.
Ivan Moskvin as Polikushka.
Precisely. Moskvin was already a big deal on the stage, a very distinguished actor. But somehow, he translated his craft perfectly to the screen. He gives this fully convincing psychological portrayal.
What made it so different, so revolutionary for 1922? Because silent film acting could be pretty big.
Oh, absolutely. Very broad, lots of gesturing, exaggerated facial expressions, German expressionism or just very theatrical posing. Moskvin did the opposite.
How?
His power was in his precision. Specifically, the sources say, through restrained gestures, tiny things, a flicker in the eyes, a slight tremble of the hand. Very controlled, very internal.
So he was acting from the inside out while maybe others were showing emotion from the outside in, like a spectacle.
That's a great way to put it. His subtlety is what keeps the film from feeling dated or, naive. Critics at the time, and looking back, basically said this performance was the first real achievement of its kind in world cinema.
Wow.
It brought psychological depth, that internal conflict, to the screen in a way people hadn't really seen before.
That's amazing. And it's even more amazing when you hear about the conditions they were working under. The technical side of things sounds like pure chaos.
It honestly feels like a miracle the film even exists, let alone looks as good as it does. The sources talk about really primitive methods like the camera barely moved and there was almost no editing in the modern sense.
Stat camera, long takes.
Yeah, but beyond that, there was this massive crisis, a desperate shortage of film stock right after the revolution.
Right, I read that detail. It's incredible. It's that classic story, isn't it? Creation under extreme pressure.
It really is. And there's this strange connection, maybe. The primitive tech, the static camera, the lack of fancy editing it, actually might have helped showcase Moskvin's acting.
How do you mean?
Well, if you can't use quick cuts or dramatic camera angles to create emotion, what's left?
The actor.
Exactly. The actor has to carry everything. The technical limitations almost forced this focus on psychological realism. The poverty of means pushed the artistic innovation.
And speaking of poverty, the actual numbers for the film stock are just mind-blowing. The final film is, 1,366 meters long?
Yeah, about that.
But to shoot that entire feature film, they only used just over 2,000 meters of negative film stock.
Think about that ratio. That's like hardly any room for mistakes, for retakes, for trimming scenes down. Less than 700 meters difference between what they shot and the final cut.
It's insane efficiency. They must have planned every single shot meticulously.
Absolutely. The sources actually claim this was reportedly almost the entire stock available in Russia at the time.
The entire stock.
Almost. Making it a shooting record, they say that's almost impossible to beat. Just shows the level of scarcity.
Wow. That kind of pressure.
It forces a certain kind of creativity, I guess. But despite all the basic camera work, the practically non-existent film stock the movie still works.
Wow.
It looks coherent.
Surprisingly, yes. It really speaks to the commitment of that whole film commune. They achieved this gritty realism partly out of necessity. The interior scenes feel very natural. The sets look lived in. And they managed several really effective outdoor scenes, too, even ones with many extras, like a big market scene. They squeezed everything they possibly could out of every single frame they shot.
So let's pull this all together.
Yeah.
We've got this deeply psychological, tragic story based on Tolstoy.
Right.
Made by this unusual communal group.
Yep.
Under the absolute worst technical conditions imaginable, almost no film, basic camera.
Extreme limitations.
And somehow, out of all that, comes this world-first performance in psychological acting. It's pretty much the definition of a landmark film. That combination, the Tolstoyan story about cursed money, Moskvin's revolutionary performance, and the sheer scarcity they overcame to make it, kind of reinforces that theme, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That Eastern European myth of money as a destructive and sinister force. The story's theme and the story of its making feel linked.
It's just a phenomenal achievement for such an early film. Polikushka, this silent movie, born from post-revolutionary chaos and scarcity, really did signal the beginning of true artistic cinema in Russia.
Absolutely. And that kind of leads us right into the final thought we wanted to leave you with today.
Okay.
This film's greatest artistic leap, that incredible psychological realism from Moskvin, seems directly connected to the technical poverty, the scarcity they faced.
Right. The limits force the innovation.
Exactly. So the question to maybe mull over is this. How often does that happen? How much can extreme pressure, limited resources, paradoxically sharpen creative focus, and maybe even lead to these kinds of first real achievements in art or technology or anywhere else? Something to think about next time you see something brilliant that came out of tough circumstances.